Okay, so let's start with the end of World War II. And once again, the US manages to leave the World War mostly unscathed in terms of bombing. Yes, we had Pearl Harbor, but most of the damage, again, occurs on the European continent and on the Asian continent. The US kind of gets away pretty easy on this one. So, while Europe is rebuilding and while Asia is trying to come together from decolonizing under France and Japan, the US is really the only world power left. And Harry Truman is very proud of this. That was kind of some of his reasoning behind the atomic bomb, right? Was like, we are so powerful, nobody else is going to be able to beat us because we have this bomb and nobody else does, as far as we know, right? So, after World War II ends, we instantly get what has come to be known as the Cold War. And it is cold because it means there's no direct fighting between the two countries that are at war. The US and the Soviet Union never directly meet in conflict. We use all sorts of other countries to fight our wars for us, but the two of us never officially meet in conflict. So it's a Cold War for us, but it's a hot war for everybody else. And it starts very basically by dealing with our political differences between the Soviet Union and communism and the United States and the capitalist free world. So pre-World War II, the politics of the Soviet Union really don't concern us. We had that Red Scare back in the 1920s, but for the most part, we don't really pay attention to Soviet Union and Russia. They're so far away, they're doing their own thing. And then during World War II, we team up with Stalin and the Soviet Union because we both want to take down Hitler for different reasons. Stalin is mad at Hitler because Hitler turned against their non-aggression pact, and we are mad at Hitler because, he's not looking real great to the rest of the world, so we got to take care of him. So we team up for that. But then, once World War II is over, we now have one enemy, and it is Stalin and the Soviet Union. And they have one enemy, and it is us and capitalism. We don't like Stalin. We don't like the Soviet Union. Again, not because of the war crimes and the crimes against humanity. We don't like them because they're communist. And communism goes against capitalism. And Stalin doesn't like the US for many, many reasons, but not the right ones. He thinks we're a little bit too arrogant. We are kind of full of ourselves. And we are capitalists, and that doesn't get along with communism. So we have come to this agreement back during the Yalta Conference with the Soviet Union that once World War II is over and we've taken Germany, that we have to do something with Germany. We can't just let them run their own country again. It didn't go well after World War I. So this time we're stepping in and we're going to deal with it. And so instead of just giving Germany back to the Germans after World War II, we take Germany and we divide it into zones of occupation. And so depending on where in Germany you are either going to be run by the Soviet Union, which is the eastern part of Germany, or one of the Allied countries, Great Britain, France, and the US, depending on where in Western Germany you are. France controls the area of Germany on the border of France. That makes sense. The US occupies the lower corner of Germany, and then Great Britain takes the upper quadrant, and then the Soviet Union gets the eastern side. But Berlin is in the eastern side of Germany. So instead of giving Berlin to the Soviets because it's the capital of Germany, we also divide Berlin into its own zones of occupation. So Berlin is in East Germany, but then within East Germany, within Berlin, we've divided Berlin into East and West Berlin, which is essentially the same as somebody coming into our city and just cutting it in half and saying, you guys belong to this now, the other half belongs to that, and you can't interact with each other anymore. But when we let World War I, when we let Germany take over after World War I, they didn't really do a great job. That's how we got Hitler. So we're going to do it right this time. Unfortunately, for Eastern Germany, the Soviet Union does not live up to the agreement they've made with the Yalta Conference, and so they do not actually allow for free elections in East Germany or in the rest of Eastern Europe, even though they were supposed to. The whole point of the Yalta Conference was that once the war was over, there would be free elections in Eastern Europe. But the Soviet Union basically says, nah, we're just you can elect somebody, but it has to be a communist, and it has to be somebody who's working with the Soviet government. So they're not really free elections. And this is going to lead to some massive security concerns in the free world and what it means for the US to be free and what it means for the Western world to be free, while the Eastern world is communist. And we start to see the split of ideals real quick, and it really starts to escalate very quickly. In 1946, Winston Churchill, who is no longer the Prime Minister of Great Britain, comes to Fulton, Missouri, and he gives a speech which is known as the Iron Curtain speech today. And he talks about how the Iron Curtain, this metaphorical Iron Curtain, has descended over Eastern Europe. And it is the duty of the free world to contain communism within that Iron Curtain. And we cannot let it cross, because if we let communism spread, that the world will not be free anymore, and that the world will fall to communism. And it is going to be the responsibility of the free world to contain communism. But what the free world is at this point is really just the United States, because the rest of Europe still needs to be rebuilt. And so we're going to visit that in the next video, the rebuilding of Europe and the containing of communism and where that gets us. So follow along for the next step in the first years of the Cold War.